I need to tell you something about the regional director. What is it? We're having an affair. It's wrong, I know. An affair? With him? How could you? I feel terrible.
On an ordinary Thursday evening in October, I was alone on an empty office floor. The overhead lights had started switching off automatically in the sections nobody was using. I had a half-eaten granola bar on my desk and a client report I needed to finish before 9 a.m. the next day. And then my coworker walked up to me and asked me for a favor. A small favor. A 30-second phone call. A completely reasonable thing one colleague might ask of another. I said yes. I made the call. And I did not find out until weeks later that the woman on the other end of that phone, the woman I had lied to on behalf of someone I trusted, was not who I had been told she was. She wasn't a worried stranger. She wasn't calling out of concern. She already knew exactly where her husband was. She had known for months. She wasn't looking for information. She was collecting evidence. And the moment I gave her my name, the moment I said, cheerfully, professionally, helpfully, "Hi, this is Alex calling from the office, just wanted to let you know he's in a client meeting," I became part of her file. I was Exhibit A. And I didn't even know there was a trial. Here is what I've learned about workplace affairs, about betrayal, and about the particular kind of intelligence that belongs to people who have been underestimated for a very long time. They are patient in ways that feel almost inhuman. They do not act when they're angry. They act when they're ready. And by the time they move, there is no version of events where they lose. This is that story. Stay with me. I want you to picture a mid-sized corporate office. Not glamorous. Not the kind of place you'd see in a movie. 60 people. An open floor plan with fluorescent lighting and that was where I landed at 29 years old, freshly transferred from another branch, carrying exactly two things, a box of desk supplies and the optimistic belief that this was going to be a fresh start. I want to tell you about Diana. Diana was the senior account manager. 11 years at the company. The kind of person who knew every client by first name, remembered their kids' ages, their contract renewal dates, the name of their assistant's dog. She was in her late 30s, polished in a way that looked effortless but almost certainly wasn't, and she had a laugh that made an entire room feel like it was in on the joke. She took me under her wing from almost the first week. She showed me the systems, walked me through the client relationships, introduced me to the right people, warned me gently away from the wrong ones. She bought me coffee on my second day and told me I was going to be great here, in a tone that made it feel like a fact rather than a nicety. I thought I had won the new job lottery. A mentor. An ally. Someone in my corner before I'd even figured out where the corners were. What Diana was, beneath the warmth and the competence and the perfectly calibrated friendliness, was a woman who had been conducting a 5-year affair with the regional director. Her boss. The man in the corner office with the nice watch and the framed photo of his family on his desk that he turned slightly toward the wall when certain people came in. I didn't know this at the time. When I eventually found out, not through gossip, not through any dramatic revelation, but through a quiet conversation with an older coworker named Pat who delivered the information with the same energy she'd used to tell me the third-floor printer was jammed again, I understood immediately why nobody had said anything. Everyone knows, Pat told me. Nobody talks about it because he signs the performance reviews. That was it. That was the entire calculus. 60 people. An open secret. And a collective, unspoken agreement that this was simply a fact of the building, like the broken coffee machine and the parking situation, unpleasant, unchangeable, not worth the cost of addressing. I was the new person. And new people, in offices like that one, learn very quickly, the fastest way to make enemies is to be the person who says the thing everyone else has agreed not to say. So I said nothing. I filed it away. I kept my head down. I did my job. And I thought, the way you think things when you're young and optimistic and haven't yet been taught otherwise, that this situation had nothing to do with me. I was wrong. It had everything to do with me. I just hadn't been introduced to my role yet. Now I need to tell you about Claire. If this were a film, Claire would be the character that audiences underestimate for the first hour. She wouldn't be the loudest person in the room, or the most obviously powerful one, or the one making dramatic speeches. She'd be the one in the background. The one you keep glimpsing at the edge of scenes, saying reasonable things, smiling graciously, present but not demanding attention. And then, in the final act, you'd realize she had been the one running everything the whole time. Claire was the wife. I know that sounds reductive. I don't mean it that way. She was, separately, a professional in healthcare administration, a mother of two, a woman who had, by every account I was later able to piece together, spent the better part of a decade being quietly, methodically erased from her own story by a man who had decided she was background scenery. She had suspected the affair for over a year before any of this began. She'd found a hotel receipt in a coat pocket. She'd noticed the late nights and the face-down phone. She had seen the way certain text messages arrived and were immediately deleted. She had felt, in a specific way that people who live with someone feel things before they can prove them, that something in her marriage had shifted permanently and irrevocably and that the shift had a name she hadn't been given yet. But Claire had worked in corporate compliance before healthcare. She understood documentation. She understood the difference between knowing something and being able to prove it. She understood that acting on suspicion, confronting, accusing, demanding, was the move of a person who wanted to feel better in the short term and would pay for it in the long term. So she didn't confront. She didn't accuse. She didn't demand. She waited. She watched. And one morning, she drove to the office under the pretense of dropping off charity raffle tickets, completely plausible. Their company was sponsoring a community event, and she signed in at reception as a vendor visitor, and she walked slowly through the office floor while making pleasant small talk, and her eyes moved across every desk, every face, every personal item and framed print and photograph. She was memorizing the landscape. She was identifying the people closest to him. She was learning who the players were. And then she left, collected her visitor badge sticker, thanked the receptionist warmly, and drove home. The raffle tickets were real, by the way. She actually dropped them off. That detail, the fact that there were real raffle tickets, is the one that still gets me. Because it tells you everything about the kind of intelligence Claire was working with. Not careless. Not reckless. Not fueled by the hot, chaotic energy of someone who wants to be caught wanting revenge. Precise. Clean. Always with a legitimate reason for being exactly where she was. She went home. She made notes. And then she set her trap. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. That's the thing about truly effective plans, they don't require complexity. They only require that the other people involved behave exactly as they've already demonstrated they will. Claire called the main office number. Not a direct line. The main number. The one that rang at whichever desk happened to be nearest and available. She identified herself as the regional director's wife. She said she was trying to reach him urgently.
Understood.
Something about one of the children, minor but time-sensitive. She let her voice carry just the right amount of controlled concern, the kind that asks to be helped without demanding it. Then she waited to see what the office did with that information. What the office did, what Diana did, was exactly what Claire had known it would do. Diana intercepted the message. And then she came to my desk. She sat on the edge of the desk next to mine. She kept her voice low. She told me his wife had called, that he was on a client call and couldn't be interrupted, and that she needed me to call back and let the wife know he was fine and would call her when he was done. She said it quickly. She framed it as a favor. She said, "You know how it is," in a tone that assumed we were on the same team, that I understood the dynamics here, that I was, without having ever been asked or having ever agreed, already part of the architecture of this secret. And I, helpful, new, eager to be a good colleague, completely without the information I would have needed to make a different choice, I picked up the phone. The line rang twice. A woman answered. Her voice was clear. Warm. Completely steady. I told her what I'd been told to say. He's in a client meeting.
Hello.
He's fine. He'll call you as soon as he's done. So sorry you had to wait. There was a pause. Not the pause of someone worried. Not the pause of someone relieved. A pause that I now understand as the pause of a person receiving exactly the confirmation they came for. She thanked me. Said that was very thoughtful. And then she asked me, conversationally, gently, not in a way that raised a single flag, who she was speaking with. I gave her my name. My actual name. Because I had absolutely no reason not to. She asked how long I'd been working there. I told her, about 2 months, new to the team. She said how lovely, that he always spoke so highly of his team, and she hoped I was settling in well. She was warm. She was gracious. She was perfect. She said goodbye and she hung up. I set the receiver down and went back to my report. I finished it. I went home. I made pasta. I watched something forgettable on television. I went to sleep. I did not think about that phone call once. Somewhere across town, Claire was already writing down my name. She had a folder. I would learn this later. A physical folder and a digital one, organized by date, containing hotel receipts, phone records she'd obtained legally through her carrier, printed calendar entries, and now, a new entry. The date of the call, the time, the name of the employee who had made it, and a brief note, covered for him. Gave information to intercept wife's inquiry. Appears unaware of situation. Appears unaware. She had given me that. She had written it down. In the middle of building a case that would eventually reach the parent company's compliance office, she had made a note protecting me from my own helpfulness. I didn't know that. I wouldn't know it for months. But she wrote it anyway. The first sign that something had shifted came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning when the regional director didn't show up to a meeting he'd called himself. His assistant said he was working remotely. His calendar said otherwise. By midday there was a specific kind of energy moving through the office floor, that particular pressure drop feeling that happens when management is having a crisis they haven't briefed the staff on yet. People were speaking slightly more quietly. Hallway conversations ended sooner. HR had been in and out of his office twice before noon with the door closed. Diana called me into a small conference room that afternoon. She closed the door. She sat down across the table and she looked,
Let's
for
review
the
the
first
key
time since I'd
metrics
known
for
her,
Q4.
like someone who'd lost
Yes,
access to the version of
projections
herself
look
that always
strong.
knew what to do next.
Good. We should
She
adjust
told
for
me
the new
everything.
variables.
The
I'll
relationship.
prepare an updated
The
analysis.
years. The complication of his marriage. And then she told me about the HR complaint. About the compliance inquiry. About the fact that his wife had filed a formal report that cited documented evidence of coordinated deception by multiple office employees. And that my name was in it. I remember the feeling of the information arriving. It wasn't sharp, the way I might have expected. It was more like stepping off a curb in the dark, that lurch of ground that should have been solid turning out not to be. I said, very quietly, she wasn't calling because she was worried, was she? Diana didn't answer. The silence was the answer. I sat with the full shape of it for the rest of that day. The morning Claire had visited the office with her raffle tickets. The call to the main number instead of a direct line. The measured pause when I identified myself. The warm, perfect, completely controlled way she had asked for my name, my tenure, my role. She had known. She had known from the first ring of that phone. The call wasn't a search for information. It was a test to see how the office would respond. And the office, Diana, had responded exactly as expected. And I had been handed the phone like a prop in someone else's production. The investigation took 6 weeks. There were interviews. Quiet, formal conversations in borrowed conference rooms with compliance officers from the parent company who drove in from 3 states away and who were, I will say, scrupulously fair. I told the truth. All of it. I had been given a task by a senior colleague, I had completed it without the information I would have needed to decline it, and I had not understood what I was participating in. I said it plainly and without drama. They were not unkind. The regional director resigned before the investigation concluded. To spend more time with his family. HR read the statement to the assembled floor on a Wednesday afternoon. Not one person in that room made a sound. Not a laugh, not a cough, not a murmur. 60 people breathing in complete silence. I have never been in a room that said so much by saying nothing. Diana was transferred. A different division, a different city, a title that was technically lateral but functionally a demotion dressed up in relocation language. I received a verbal acknowledgement that I had been placed in an unfair position by a colleague and that no formal action was being taken against me, along with a quiet suggestion that in the future I might consider asking clarifying questions before completing tasks of an ambiguous nature on behalf of others. I said that seemed reasonable. I meant it. 3 months after the investigation closed, I walked into the lobby of the building for an unrelated errand and I found Claire there. She was returning some equipment of her husband's that had apparently been on company inventory. She saw me. She smiled in a way that could have been coincidence or could have been the most precisely timed thing I had ever witnessed. I still don't know which. We sat near the window and we talked for almost an hour. She bought coffee
Good to
from the
see
lobby
you.
cart.
How's your
She was
morning?
warmer in person than she had been
Busy,
on the
but
phone,
good.
which I
And
hadn't thought was
yours?
possible.
Good to see
I
you.
told her I was sorry.
How's your morning?
That I hadn't
Busy,
known.
but good.
That if
And
I'd
yours?
understood what was happening I never would have made that call. She looked at me and said, simply and completely without judgment, I know you didn't know. That's why I made sure it was on record that you didn't. She had protected me before she'd even met me. In the middle of her own crisis, she had been precise enough, careful enough, decent enough, to make sure the person who'd been used didn't get burned for it. I
That's a
asked her how
great
long she'd been
idea. It
planning
will
it.
help us
She was
identify the
quiet for
key
a moment.
priorities.
Then she said,
Exactly.
I didn't
I'll
plan it.
compile the initial
I just
data
stopped
for us
pretending
to
I didn't see it.
review.
There's a
Perfect.
difference.
Let's schedule a
Planning is
follow-up.
vindictive. This was just clarity. And then she said the thing I have never stopped thinking about. You know what the most dangerous thing in an office is? It's not the affair. It's not the lies. It's the people who know, and decide it's not their problem. The whole system runs on people deciding it's not their problem. I just decided it was. She finished her coffee. She said it was lovely to finally meet me properly. She walked out through the glass doors into the afternoon. I watched her go. I thought that was the end of the story. About a year later I was scrolling through LinkedIn, the way you do, usually in a low-grade moment of professional restlessness, and I saw Diana's profile. New company. Good title. Head of Client Relations. I clicked through to the company's leadership page out of nothing more than idle curiosity. And there, listed as VP of Strategy, was Claire Holt. I sat with that for a long time. I considered coincidence. I took it seriously, turned it over, looked at it from multiple angles. And then I remembered, planning is vindictive. This was just clarity. What if the clarity hadn't ended with the investigation? What if Claire, who had watched a man exploit someone's ambition and misplaced their loyalty for 5 years, had seen something in Diana that the whole situation had buried? What if she had understood that the affair was a catastrophic personal failure wrapped around a genuinely capable person, and she had decided to separate those two things and give one of them somewhere legitimate to go? I don't know if that's true. I have never reached out to either of them. It may be coincidence. It may be that they never interact, that they exist in the same company the way people in large buildings exist, aware of each other, nothing more. But here is what I know for certain. Claire Holt was written off, looked through, and made a background character in her own life for years. And when she finally decided to stop accepting that, she did it without cruelty, without sloppiness, without a single moment that she couldn't account for. She built something airtight out of raffle tickets and a phone call and a carefully written name in a folder. And whether or not she hired Diana, whether or not there's a redemption story beneath the revenge story, what she did was show everyone in that building, quietly and permanently, what it looks like when someone who has been underestimated decides to stop being patient about it. I still work in an office. Different company, different city. I am more careful now in ways I wasn't before. I ask questions before I do favors. I notice things I once would have filed under, not my problem. And sometimes, when a colleague says, "Hey, can you just grab that for me?" It's just a quick call, I pause. Just for a second. And I ask who's on the other end of the line. Because the person picking up the phone always thinks they're the one in control of the conversation. Claire taught me that's almost never true.
If this story made you feel something, subscribe. New stories every week. Real workplaces, real people, real consequences. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been made part of something at work without being told the full story? I want to know.